Have you ever been on one of those teams where everything just clicks, and then, of course, others where it feels like you're just wading through mud? Well, it turns out it's not just luck. There's a real science to what makes teams work, and today we're going to break it down using some key insights from industrial organizational psychology.
So let's start with a question for you. Go ahead and think about the absolute best team you've ever been a part of. Got it? Okay, now, was it amazing from the very first day? My guess is probably not. See, very few teams start out great. The best ones, they learn, they adapt, and they get better over time. So here's what we're going to cover today. First, we'll figure out what a real team even is. Then we'll look at a blueprint for making that team effective. We'll dive into the psychology of the team mind, see how this all plays out in a super high-stakes environment, outer space. And then we'll wrap up with a practical tool you can start using right away.
Okay, first things first. We use the word team all the time, right? But in IO psychology, it has a really specific definition. And you got to understand this foundation because if you don't have a real team to start with, well, none of the other stuff we're going to talk about really matters.
A real team has three core characteristics. First, it's bounded. Everyone knows exactly who is on the team and who isn't. Second, it's stable. The membership doesn't change every 5 minutes. And third, and this is the big one, it's interdependent. That means members genuinely need each other to get the job done. Think about it. One person can't do it all.
All right, so now we know what a team is, but how do we make one effective? Well, good news, it's not magic. There's actually a science-backed blueprint for this, a kind of recipe for success.
This right here is a classic model from team effectiveness research by Richard Hackman. And the whole idea is that you can't just throw people together and hope for the best. For a team to be really effective, you have to put certain key conditions in place right from the start. So you start with what we just defined, a real team. Then you give them a compelling direction, a goal that gets them fired up. You need an enabling structure so everyone knows the rules of the road. Then you need a supportive context from the organization. And finally, access to some expert coaching. You get these things right, and you're well on your way to high performance.
So we've got the structure down. But beyond all that, there's this critical cognitive piece to amazing teamwork. It's what's going on inside the heads of the team members. You know, researchers call this concept shared mental models, but you can just think of it as the team's shared playbook, or its operating system. It's that feeling when everyone just gets what you're trying to do.
And this is what's so cool about it. When a team has a really strong shared mental model, they can almost anticipate each other's needs. They can coordinate their actions so smoothly, sometimes without even talking. It's like they can read each other's minds.
And hey, this isn't just a theory. There's real-world research to back it up. A study of combat teams in Singapore found that the teams with more similar and accurate mental models, the ones who were on the same page, performed way more effectively. It just proves that spending time to get in sync really works. Okay, to see just how critical these ideas are, let's look at one of the most extreme team environments you can possibly imagine: long-duration spaceflight. So NASA funded research to study teams in these isolated, confined environments, to simulate space missions. They wanted to understand what kinds of roles people naturally fall into and how those roles affect the team's success. And what they found is pretty amazing. They identified 11 distinct team roles that just kept popping up. And these roles can be broken down into two main types. First, you've got the social roles. Functional roles, like the entertainer or the team builder, well, they were really good for team cohesion. But the dysfunctional roles, like the attention seeker, yeah, they had a negative impact. No surprise there. The other category was task roles. And what the research found here was that all 6 of these roles were generally positive for the team. They were all about getting the mission done effectively.
Okay, so we've got a definition, a model, and some really high-stakes examples. But how did teams actually get better day to day? It turns out there's a surprisingly simple tool for this.
Get this. On average, teams that conduct regular debriefs outperform teams that don't by over 20%. I mean, that is a huge return for what is a pretty simple practice. So a debrief is really just a structured conversation where the team reflects on what just happened. You talk about what went well, what could be improved, and then you agree on a plan. The key here is that it's about being developmental, not judgmental. And you don't need any complicated tech for this. Research shows a simple, structured approach like this is super effective. You can actually do a quick version of this in just 5 minutes after a meeting. First, what happened? Then, what went well and what were the challenges? And finally, what are we going to do differently next time? But here's the most important part.
You have to make it a consistent habit, and you have to follow up on what you agree to do. When people see that their feedback actually leads to real change, they start to trust the process, and that's when the team's effectiveness just skyrockets.
So let's wrap this up. The bottom line is that great teamwork isn't an accident. It's really the result of having clear definitions, putting the right structure in place, developing a shared mindset, and committing to always learning and getting better.
And that leaves us with one last thought for you. On your very next project, whether it's at school or at work, how could you use a quick 5-minute debrief to make the whole experience better for everyone involved? Thanks for joining this explainer.